So good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Ciara.
Very nice to be here with you.
Thank you.
So I'm here with Frank Canavan, former headmaster of Clostaignol Jesuit School here in Galway, Ireland. So Frank is going to talk to us a little bit about his experience of staff formation. So Frank, you've been a teacher and a deputy headmaster and a headmaster for a number of years in a Jesuit school, and you've been involved in staff formation. What would you highlight as being essential to staff formation?
Well, because of its long history and geographical spread, the Society of Jesus has a great deal of documented history and a great deal of policy formation documentation, starting with the Ratio Studiorum right down to the latter-day characteristics of Jesuit education and Ignatian pedagogy. So there's a great deal that one can present to anybody interested in education. Myself, I became interested in the Jesuits through the work of Gerald Manley Hopkins and somewhat later through the work of James Joyce. But when I came to work with the Jesuits, the first thing that impressed, of course, was the dedication of the people among whom I was working. And gradually, through the inter-Jesuit communications, I began to learn more and more, appreciate the fact that they were in every part of the world, that they had a very wide range of missions, and that education was a very significant, important one, but not the only one, which meant that there were opportunities for Jesuits with all talents to work at whatever suited and at which they were best. And that notion of being the best at what you're doing became very significant to me in observing the work of the society around the world. It was also important to realize that it wasn't just the transmission of information about the Jesuits or about their work that was important. There was also the affective aspect of it, not just the intellectual or cognitive. It was the way that one's imagination was caught by the heroism, in many cases, of many of the Jesuits who gave their lives, literally, for the sake of their ideals. And I became aware also of the great contributions that the Society had made through its schools in the thousands of musical and dramatic presentations which they gave across Europe for hundreds of years. So that, for instance, if we were putting on a performance in Clostaignol, this was in the tradition and could be placed in that tradition of catching people's imagination and presenting the world through one's imaginative powers. And that meant, therefore, that things like music and art and literature were important, as were the sciences, because the Jesuits had contributed to all of these disciplines. So as time went on then, I became familiar with other Jesuit schools at home and abroad. I was enabled and supported in attending conferences, having discussions with people from different ethnic backgrounds, but with the same Jesuit tradition. And this was one of the impressive aspects of it. Whether one was in Ireland or Hong Kong, where the Jesuits had been for a long time, Irish Jesuits, or in Spain, where the Jesuits began, one picked up similar qualities in the work of what people were doing. And always there was this striving to be the best you can be. I found that very inspiring. I would say that my formation personally had very direct influences from reading, documentation, history, and so on, but also from face-to-face meetings with and cooperation with Jesuits and their cooperators, so that the formation is direct, but it's also indirect, and that indirect part is very significant because people pick it up without quite realizing what's going on, and it's all the better for that.
So Frank, you mentioned your own personal experience of Jesuit education and quite a deep and rich experience of that. How do you ensure that teachers who don't have that knowledge and depth of experience in Jesuit education get it, and that they can then offer their students a truly Jesuit education?
Well, this begins really at the point of interview, and the interviewing of candidates for posts in Jesuit schools it's important in every school, it's important in every job. It's particularly important here to discern that candidates have some idea of what the society is trying to achieve, but above all that they're curious about it and that they can commit to working with it, even if they don't fully understand the depths or don't even get the theology behind a lot of what happens. But so long as they are disposed to support and be enthusiastic, then there's a fair chance that they will be successful and that they will be able to contribute. Now, after that point of interview and appointment then, other aspects, or I should say other elements of the establishment, the Board of Management, the administration, and of course fellow teachers, will all contribute directly and indirectly. First of all, by the way in which they conduct their business, so that you immediately feel that there's care for people within the establishment, that there is concern for their welfare, that there is a sense of justice about everything that's done, and that there is a concentration on the core thrust of the job, which is care of students and what we used to refer to as the cura personalis, so that you take for granted to some extent that people are competent in the particular subjects they might take, but you also are making for the assumption that what happens beyond that is understood and appreciated. In other words, that when we talk about, young people having a sense of self-esteem, they pick this up from the affirmation they get from their teachers. When we talk about their having a sense of curiosity about the world, they pick this up from their teachers without being told. It's the Jesuit way of doing things. It communicates itself. And that it's modelled by fellow teachers, by the administration, by the Board of Management, in the kinds of things that they propose to new teachers and give them opportunities to do. For instance, ensuring that they have the inter-Jesuit communications, which brings them into touch with what's happening in South America, what's happening in the Far East, what's happening in North America at all levels of education in which the Jesuits are involved. And then that there are opportunities for and encouragement for young teachers and teachers who are making their way in Jesuit schools for the first time to attend conferences, to visit other schools, and generally speaking, have opportunities for discussion and for questioning and for deepening their knowledge of and their appreciation of what the school is trying to do. I would say also that in my own experience, again, referring to the effective in our growth, is the visits to places associated with Jesuits, whether it's Loyola, or Montserrat, Manresa, and other places where Jesuits have been prominent or where they have been heroic. And I think that also will contribute to people having a deeper appreciation of what they want to achieve and what the society is trying to achieve in education.
Frank, how would you say can the school administration encourage and support teachers in their further formation?
Well, one of the most important things is that people's interest, commitment and achievement is acknowledged. This applies in any walk of life really, and particularly here where sometimes the financial rewards may not be enormous, but I think that people will respond to acknowledgement of their efforts with further effort. And I think the continuing encouragement towards reflection on what's going on is very important, so that people are given time to reflect on their experience from time to time, so that that reflection can lead to further action and enhanced experience. Now, it's the job of the administration to see that this is an ongoing process. Most certainly a very important part of that is not to overload, and at the same time to have the process continuing, so that one never feels that one is finished or that one has learned everything there is to be learned, because it simply isn't true. There is more and more to be learned, not just factual information, but deeper and deeper appreciation. And that sense, that notion of depth of appreciation is very important in this context.
So one thing we often hear mentioned by teachers when it comes to staff formation is that they don't have enough time, that teachers are so busy already, they find it difficult to set aside the time for that staff formation and that continuous formation. What are your thoughts on this, Frank?
Well, first I'd say that every profession, whether it's the medical, engineering, barristers, all professions, take it for granted that continuing formation is necessary, and the teaching profession, I think, would be no different from that. In fact, because things change quite a lot in the whole education business, teachers really, I think, when they give it serious thought, will realise that there is no way that you can do without continuing formation. There is one thing about that has occurred to me, and I have to be careful because it might reflect too much on my own experience. And that is, if teachers were given some realization, a full, deep realization of the influence which they have and of the importance of what they do, then I think that they would not just be willing to undergo continuing formation, I think they would be very keen to do so. Now, in my own case, because of the opportunities that I've had hundreds of testimonies of the importance of the school life in the lives of young people, written, verbal and so on, glowing accounts of how their lives were enhanced by the work of the teachers whom they encountered, and of how their lives in some cases were turned round by the experience of meeting the right teacher at the right time, or having some intervention in their lives by somebody in the school. And it's undoubted for me, it's incontrovertible at this stage, that teachers have an enormously important opportunity in the lives of young people. And I think if they fully realise that, and if they were given reason to realise that, I think that they would be keen and in fact enthusiastic about continuing formation. It is the business of the administration to ensure that there is time. It's not an extra, it's not an add-on. There was a time when we used to talk about extracurricular activities, and then we began to realise that in fact these are co-curricular activities. There are, whether it was involvement with music or sport or whatever. And in the same way, formation of teachers is not separate from the life of the teacher or from the profession of the teacher. It's of the core activity of the teacher that the formation is continuing. Now, that can sometimes, in particular contexts, be difficult to communicate. There may be outside influences that are not helpful, or that are keeping people from full commitment, and we all experience that in the real world. But within Jesuit schools, the task of the administration is to find opportunities for the communication of how important this is, and the follow-through with the opportunities for it. So I would say that it's not just a question of not finding time. I think it's, first of all, to get a grasp of how important it is, because of how important the work that teachers do is.
Frank, you mentioned earlier the importance of depth in Jesuit education as opposed to width, and the importance of going deeper, which ties in with what we know as the Magis. Could you tell us a bit about the Magis in staff formation in particular?
It's obviously connect with what I've been saying. It's a concept which runs through the whole society. The idea that we are doing well, what we are achieving is good, what we're achieving is worthy. Now, how could we make it more worthy? How could we make it better? How could we take our mission forward with greater conviction, perhaps? It's not that we want to be busier. It's not that we want to cover more territory. It's that we want to do what we're doing with greater depth and conviction. And in the case of teacher formation, this concept of wanting to be better is at the core. And it's not something that is to be imposed on people, because then it's only a burden. And it may very well give the notion that you're not doing enough and you're not doing well. So, you better pull your socks up and do a bit better, or you better be busier and do more, and we want you to work more hours. And it's not that at all. It's something that comes from within and is a permanent part of one's outlook on the world. I have gifts, I have abilities. Now, how can I use them to the maximum? And that means, therefore, that paradoxically, it means that I am not content in one sense, because that might lead to complacency. But I am content at a deep level, because I know that I'm willing to take what I'm doing as far as I'm able to take it. So that gives me the content of my own commitment. So the magis is sometimes misunderstood, but when properly grasped, I believe it's a great incentive to giving more and more depth to one's own life, and by implication indeed then to the work that one is doing. So everybody benefits.
Frank, thank you very much for taking the time to share your
My
experience
pleasure.
with us. It's been great.